extending a warm welcome to everybody who's come here. You all already know the topic of this webinar, but let me just textualize a little bit in just 2 lines. So we're going to talk about maintaining coaching presence, which is an extremely important competency, an ICF competency, as well as whatever coaching conversation you have, it's a very important competency to maintain, and a competency which is, it's quite of an art. At least to me, I'm a novice coach. I'm beginning my coaching journey. So for me personally, it's a very tricky competency, and I don't know how many of you all feel that. Do chime in if you have similar thoughts. But essentially, coaching presence is the ability to be fully present, mind, body, soul, if you believe in soul, in the coaching conversation. And being that present is something which is, it's an aspiration, not just for coaching, but for life in general. And I'm so glad that we have somebody as experienced as a speaker here, Dr. Arvind Agrawal. So he is an accomplished professional. He has decades of experience working in top leadership roles, being a board member, a CEO, a director, from various backgrounds, and he's worked with some of the best top companies in India. He comes with decades of, I would imagine, not decades, but many, many years of coaching experience. He has experience in executive leadership, consulting, and he is a ICF Master Coach. Dr. Agrawal also holds a PhD from IIT Bombay, and he's an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and IIT Kharagpur. And I know introductions like these, heavy introductions, can be embarrassing for the for the accomplished people that we have today. So I'm going to save you the agony of a longer introduction, Dr. Agrawal. And please, the next 45 minutes is him talking about the topic, which is maintaining coaching presence. And he's going to take us through his experience. And hopefully, I am actually pretty sure that we are going to have some takeaways from this. So thank you so much. I'll share the PPT. If you'd like to have a few opening words before that, let me know.
Yes, Preksha, thank you so much, and good evening to all of you. Pleasure connecting with you all on this important subject, presence. And most of you are experienced coaches, practicing coaches. So I'm sure you have as much to contribute on this subject. So I would urge you to make this entire session somewhat interactive. So as I go along, if you have a point of view, it may be your thoughts or perhaps a question, please bring it up. Don't wait till I finish. Actually, I have nothing to finish. Mm-hmm. So Preksha, if we can start with the PPT, that would be great.
I'm just sharing my screen.
Right. So we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, go. Right. So as the title of my presentation shows, my struggles and strides. So I'm going to talk about the struggles that I have gone through, and also some of the strides that I have made on this particular competency, presence. And even as late as this evening, my wife and I were doing our evening walk before coming in for this session. And my wife commented that you don't seem to be here, your mind is somewhere else. So she really caught me off guard, because indeed I was thinking about this session, and I was, very much already mentally going through the PPT slides and what I'm going to say and things like that. So though I was saying nothing and we were both walking side by side, she could note my absence. So though we think we are clever, but the fact is the other person sees it through. In our body language, in our silence, in our words. So it's something very, very transparent to people around us. And if we go to the next slide, all of you who are in coaching business, you know that having presence is a crucial aspect of coaching role. It involves being fully present and attentive to clients. And objective is to being able to create a safe and supportive environment for them to explore their thoughts and feelings. So that's the importance of presence. We all know that. And if you go to the next slide, ICF, there are 11 core competencies, and ICF defines it as the ability to be fully conscious and create a spontaneous relationship with clients. Spontaneous and fully conscious. In other words, coaches with a presence are fully present and focused on their clients in the coaching relationship. They're able to create a sense of connection and rapport with their clients, something which I completely failed with my wife during this evening walk. So let me share with you what my struggles are. In the next slide, Preksha, you introduced me all my corporate background in variety of different roles over good 4 decades. So on the face of it, it sounds like a strength, but actually they all became barriers. All of those experiences over the years, they got in the way of being present with the client. And how? Firstly, as a manager, I'm super goal focused. That's the way I've been trained. I'm always conscious that what are the coaching goals, how many sessions we have, and I already carry in my head some kind of a plan as to how we're going to navigate through the sessions to be able to achieve our goals in each session. So that preoccupation with goals is one big barrier. Equally, time boundary. As you have a finite amount of time, I typically tend to have my session, which is 1.5 to 2 hours. And I am very conscious that during that 1.5 to 2 hours, I must make a difference in the client's thinking, should be able to make the client aware of underlying beliefs, what may be the way the client shifts from those underlying beliefs to what is desirable, what might be the action plan. So all this game plan, when I'm carrying in my head, again becomes a major barrier. Sense of responsibility. As a conscientious person grown in the corporate world, I'm very conscious that I have to help the client realize the return on the investment, the coaching fees which is being paid to me. So quite often, I end up judging and leading the client based on my own life experiences. Several ideas keep coming up in my mind as to what client should be doing to move forward. And it's very tempting to get it over with and suggest to the client, after all, it is just the client and you, nobody else is watching. So why not just tell the client what needs to be done? Appears to be surefire, and I'm so confident that it's worked for me over the years. So that's another temptation. So the manager in me was always very rational, quick to jump into problem solving. And this was in the way of presence that was truly needed. So my biggest struggle when I was going through credentials, ICF credential, was to keep aside my years of corporate experience and move forward. And how did I do that? Let's go to the next slide. So until about PCC level, I still was a problem solver, impatient, getting to the point, and I would give myself probably not more than 6 or 7 out of 10 on presence. It's only when I went through Master Certified Coach. In that journey, I was fortunate. I had privilege of mentoring by Cindy Muthukarpan, and Ram Ramanathan. Both of them are well known to most of you. And they drew my attention to connect with the emotions of the client and also my own emotions. And my own emotions included my anxieties, my preoccupation, all of those. This immensely benefited. And when we were talking about emotions during my MCC journey, I suddenly connected with the slew of T group sessions that I had attended as I was growing as a professional several years ago. And I attended several of T group sessions because I qualified as a T group facilitator as well. That was way back in 80s and 90s, but it was in a separate compartment. And I recognized when I was going through Cindy and Ram's mentoring that there's a connection. So that opened the door, and I realized that I have had the privilege of going through these labs, which has developed my self-awareness. It helped me connect with the emotions of others, and it also brought in higher level of emotional maturity. This was priceless gift that I already carried with me, but I had locked it up, assuming that coaching is something different. MCC journey helped me realize the connection. This was very, very important. Now, there is a question here. What is a T group, please? That's a good question. And I assume that I shouldn't have assumed this. So T group is, this was started by National Training Laboratory way back in US in Bethlehem, Maine. T stands for training. It is simply called training group. It is also known as sensitivity training, as rightly somebody has mentioned here. And ISABs offer that in good measure. And I attended these programs through ISABs only. In this, what happens is that 10, 12 people are sitting around in the circle. Each person talks about self, and others give feedback to the person, how he or she is coming across to them. There is also attention drawn to the group dynamics, what is happening to the whole group. And the facilitator is not really imposing. The group needs to manage own activity and own agenda and move forward. And it typically, I think the labs which I attended, they were typically about 5 days in duration, 5 full days. So it's very intense. And I am belaboring this point because in a coach certification program, we go through the coaching process and we learn the mechanics of it. But at a self level, the work is somewhat, I would say, suboptimal. The T group labs, that really is intense work with the self. And that's very, very important to develop self-awareness, to develop sensitivity to others, and develop your emotional maturity. This is the crucible of experience, immersive experience, that is priceless for developing presence. If you go to the next slide, please, Preksha. This is run by Indian Society of Applied Behavioral Science, as I mentioned. They were also in the coaching sessions, peer coaching. All of you have gone through peer coaching. So there were very granular feedback that helped improve self-awareness, own biases, limitations. So when I commented about coaching process, the peer coaching assumes that through that, you learn about your own emotions, you develop your awareness about what's happening to yourself. And I must acknowledge that I have today greater maturity to manage my own emotions and judgments when I'm in front of a client. And I'm able to be present in the moment and maintain a neutral, non-judgmental stance. So that's a big shift, big stride in my development as a coach. And let me share with you, while having moved this far, what are some of the things that I do to maintain presence? And some of these are very trivial things, but I'm still sharing it with you because it's something which I personally do. And many of you who are experienced coaches, you may have your own ways of ensuring that you're maintaining presence. And I'd love to hear those as well. So one very, very important, something which many of you must be using is a silence, where you're waiting with childlike curiosity, observant of clients' body language, emotions, and then calling out what you see. And this childlike curiosity is important because in the moment of silence, you're not using the time to plan out what you're going to say. If you are in that track, then you're not present. And earlier, it used to happen to me that in moments of silence, I would be thinking through, I'll be utilizing the time to plan out as to what will I say next, what will be the question, how should I word it, what may be most appropriate. So in a way, I'm dealing with my own anxieties, all the anxieties and struggles that I was talking about, rather than observing the client. A child does not have any such preoccupation. Child is in the moment. So that discipline is very important. You have to make sure that your own self, whatever is going inside, that is something you're aware of, but you keep that aside. You have to be equally mindful. And this was a big learning for me, that every session may not be value adding to the client. But yet, every session is an important step in the transformation journey that the client is going through, even if the session may appear to be running at the same place. It's an important immersive experience that the client is going through. And the learning I personally have is that I'm mindful today that coaching is a marathon, not a sprint. That frees you up from your anxiety to make a difference in every session. If we move to the next slide, please. Sharing own emotions. When you're aware of your own emotions, I have no hesitation in sharing my own vulnerability in the coaching. When confused and at a loss to figure out what to say, what to do in this instance, I acknowledge and I share it with the client that I really am at a loss. I'm not able to think through as to what may be useful at this point in time. You have a thought. So I turn that around. And often this leads the client to go deeper within and discover a way forward. So it becomes a joint discovery. So that acknowledgement is very, very important of your own vulnerability, that you will not have an answer all the time and every time. So humility to share own vulnerability is an important capability we as a coach need to have to be present with the client. And client must recognize that you are as much of a human being with your own failings, your own vulnerabilities. That brings the connect stronger, closer. Next slide, please. Summarizing, we all do that. So often paraphrasing what the client says, giving it back to the client. And often this leads the client to further reflect within and move forward. So it's testing, understanding, simple, but a sure way of acknowledging where the client is, staying connected with the client, and moving forward. Next slide. Leveling. So as Now, this is something which I do in the initial first few minutes. I would share some business information and I say business information because my clients are largely business people, that I would have picked up from the media. And I'm very mindful of the companies that my clients come from. I keep track of the company business information. So I'm a regular reader of Economic Times, Business Today, and Business World. And it invariably brings information which are relevant. And many times I would pick up information which I would share. And as I said, just the first few minutes, and that is to level with the client. Client equally acknowledges that you're concerned, you're aware, and it sort of brings me on the same plane as the client. And I can empathize with clients' anxieties, concerns, whatever is happening on the macro environment. So this extra effort is important. Next slide, please. I equally use, during the first few minutes, I would inquire how has the fortnight or the month has been for the client, significant progress on the substantive aspect of the business, personal situation, holidays, travel, training.
Dr. Agrawal, you've gone on mute, I think.
Sorry. So up to what point did I say?
We heard till the point number 3.
Okay. So equally inquiring about the family members, weddings, children admission, examination, special achievements, health. Again, this helps anchor the client. And as I said, I do that only at the beginning of the session, not during the session. Very simple, but very important. And equally, I'm happy to share with the client upfront my own milestones, highlights. If I've been away traveling somewhere, I did some interesting reading, I would share it. Again, these are all in the first 5-7 minutes, it's all done. So whatever I've shared in the last 2-3 slides, very important to anchor the client through these pleasantries, you may call it, or preambles, just to level with each other. And it paves the way for moving forward. Next slide, please. Suspending own judgments. This is the toughest part of it. Sharing own observation and asking reflective questions. And I'm bringing up this point about childlike curiosity once again. So your question needs to be with a childlike curiosity, not like a school teacher. See, a school teacher also asks questions, but she already knows the answer, and she's only checking whether a student knows the answer or not, and who among the class have done the homework, and so on and so forth. So she's checking. Childlike curiosity, child does not know the answer, but child has a curiosity. It may be a question like, why do I see the sun every morning? No, child doesn't know the answer, and she's looking for the answer. Same question if the teacher is asking, can you tell me why the sun rises in the morning? So as a coach, we need to be very, very conscious in our voice, choice of words, the pace at which we are speaking, that the questions are reflective question with a childlike curiosity. Now, I'm not suggesting you be a put on, because if you really know the answer, then you share that answer. So the answer may be that you have a sense as to what the client is going through. So you may say something like that, I have a sense that you are right now struggling with this. Then you share that. So don't quiz the client. Every question that you're asking a client, you have to make sure that you don't have an answer and only client has the answer. Then you are ensuring that you don't have a judgment and you're genuinely wanting the client to be reflective and respond. This is an art, and the only check I have is that simple check I use is that if I have an answer, I don't ask a question, I share my observation. If I don't have an answer, then I know that I have a childlike curiosity. Move on to the next slide, please. So paying undivided attention. This is now very, very important, and I learned the hard way. Firstly, your cell phone, you have to make sure that it's on silence. The worst thing that can happen is your cell phone goes off. I just realized that I didn't put the phone on silence as I'm going to speak to you. So I've just made it to silent. No note taking. This is another thing I learned as I was going through my credential training. And earlier, I used to be very tempted that when client is saying something, I must make a note. I shouldn't miss that point. I should remember it for future sessions. Now, my training has helped me develop the confidence that if it is important, I'll remember it. And if I don't remember, good chance it's not important. So absolutely, during the session, I do not take any notes. That said, immediately after the session is over, I get on to my Evernote, and I have Evernote, a folder on each client that I work with. And I would immediately jot down the key points of that session, what happened in that session, just half a dozen bullet points. So that becomes an important reference for me. And next time when I'm having a coaching session, I go through it before getting into the session. But again, I don't bring up the notes in front of a client, nor I make notes. And therefore, I'm able to have the eye contact. I'm looking at the body language. I'm conscious of the modulation on the voice. The last one is an important one. Looking at the clock. It's very tempting that, okay, I have 1.5 hour session. Let me check, where am I? It's a human to look at your watch, and the watch may be on a cell phone or on your wrist. This is, again, a big barrier when we're talking about presence. I have found a way of keeping my small clock on the desk in front of me, so that while I'm having a Zoom call, coaching session on the Zoom, I can see the clock effortlessly. If I am in-person session, then I depend on the client to keep time. And when I do get concerned about time, I inquire from the client, how are we doing on time? And the client will say that, look, yeah, we're nearly getting to the top of the hour. We still have another 10 minutes. So I have to present myself as fully available with all the time in the world. Even though, technically speaking, I have that just 1.5 hour or 2 hours, whatever we've contracted. But in my emotional presence has to be as if I have all the time for you, client. So throwing a glance at the clock is a no-no. And these are very simple things, but I found it was bit by bit, I started discovering these ways by which I can sustain the presence. Next slide, please. Session plan. So I have a broad sense of how the coaching session is progressing through my Evernote, but no predetermined specific plan for the session. So I would never prepare for a coaching session that today I'm going to do this with a client. So spontaneously, when client is bringing up, and I would always ask, so what are we going to talk about today? What do you have in mind? Where are we? So with those questions, I give an opening to the client to bring where she is, and then intuitively, I would be navigating the way forward, but not with any predetermined plan. So remaining spontaneous, And this is very, very critical. Earlier, I used to prepare. I must acknowledge that's a shift that has taken place. Thanks to my MCC training, the feedback which I got, that prepared me for being here and now and spontaneous in the way I'm connecting with the client. Next slide, please. Break. I mentioned that my sessions are 1.5, 2 hours. So it does become important to take a short break, 3 to 5 minutes, somewhere midway in the session. When I naturally get an urge to take a break, I would seek permission from the client and check if client would like to take the break. But I never make it more than 3 to 5 minutes, because if you take a longer break, chances are that the busy bee that the executive is, and most often my clients are executives, they will get on to looking at their mails and attending to phone calls. And then that's a retrogression. That's a regression. 3 to 5 minutes, have a quick grab of coffee, go to the restroom, you refresh, and you come back. Longer only if the client wants it. Sometimes client do want it, in which case you don't have a choice. And this break I have done even on an online coaching session. And it's very refreshing actually for both client as well as for me. And it's energizer. Otherwise, you tend to get into a track and you're not seeing anything beyond that. But when you take a break and you regroup, it sort of broadens and brings up newer things, newer thoughts. All very useful. Checking ins. So during the session, intermittently, I'll be checking by asking simple questions such as, how's it going? How meaningful is this? How is she feeling? How is this related to the coaching goals that we had set up? So the anxieties which I would be carrying, instead of my carrying those anxieties, I verbalize that in form of these questions. And I don't know the answer. Go back to that childlike curiosity, but client has the answer. And whatever is the client's answer is the ultimate truth in relation to all these questions. And that helps in moving forward in the coaching. So checking ins are very, very important. Next slide, please. So finally, what are we saying in terms of presence? It requires a combination of self-reflection and practice, both. And in my case, and it may help others as well, develop self-awareness and emotional intelligence by whatever means, engaging in activities such as mindfulness. Now, I, for instance, I'm not connecting it to the coaching session, but it's become part of my daily routine that when I start my day, I would have a 5 minutes rhythmic breathing, deep breathing, followed by gratitude and forgiveness. I find that has helped me in staying calm and take the day as it comes. That adds to my presence even during the coaching sessions. So whatever you can do in terms of developing mindfulness, there are several workshops these days, the Vipassana. I would again strongly recommend attend T Group Lab, and ISABs offer that even now. Of course, seek feedback from mentors, peer coaches, clients, whoever you can get feedback. And sometimes you will get feedback, sometimes you have to sense that in their responses, in their body language. So these are some of the things which I wanted to share with you, my own journey, my struggle with presence. and how I have dealt with it, how I have moved forward. So I would stop here. And Preksha,
Yes.
you're there?
Yes, I'm there. We have a couple of questions in the chat box.
Okay, let's see if we can respond to them.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, please.
So Shripad asks, do shorter sessions, 45 to 60 minutes, make presence less or more difficult? Many of us do not do 90-minute sessions.
I know, and I'm relatively slow. A lot of clients do ask for 45 minutes, 60 minutes. I find it very difficult. Maybe one needs to be a lot more surgical if you are having 45 minutes, 60-minute session. And for me, whenever I have chosen to do 60-minute session, I've never done 45 minutes, by the way. Whenever I've done 60-minute session, it's a challenge. And maybe it's because of my style, because I do spend first 5-7 minutes on pleasantries I shared in my slide. So then what is left is relatively shorter time. But that said, the fundamentals which I have shared, that should be valid whether you do 45 minutes, Shripa. What has been your experience? You're a seasoned coach yourself.
So can I add to that?
Yeah, please, Shripa.
So the context is that when I have tried to do, say, 90 minutes, what I found is that after 45 to 60 minutes, the client seems to be a bit distracted or mentally tired and not getting as much, not as open or as deep as in the first 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I kind of get that transferred onto myself where I am getting, a bit distracted in my presence by seeing that the client is getting distracted. So this interplay of, getting tired and distracted was underlying my question about, it was not a question only about number of minutes, of course, but more about presence.
Oh, I recognize that. I mean, as an seasoned coach yourself, you had something deeper in your mind. And partly the answer also lies in setting the expectation. So I upfront would have stated that we're going to have 90 minutes. And my default time setting with the client is for 2 hours. I said, we will have a coaching session for 1.5 hours. But if it spills over, I don't want you to have another meeting just at the end of 1.5 hours. I should have a latitude to continue until about 2 hours or so. So it's a setting expectation. And secondly, what I was sharing about taking a break for a few minutes, that also helps in refreshing. But in the end, you have to follow your instinct and what works for you and with your client. And some clients, like I'm just signed up a contract yesterday with 2 persons, and they wanted only 60 minutes. So that's the practical side of it. Yeah.
We have a question from Ruxana and Chandraketu. So I'd request Ruxana to unmute herself and you can directly interact with the speaker.
Yeah, Ruxana.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Doctor, for so much insight today. It's been a very, very insightful session. Please excuse me for not switching on my video. So my question is, you were talking about note-taking and how you have, you now have the confidence that you will remember any special points or any points during the conversation. Now, for me, I find note-taking very distracting, and I find it also distracts my clients sometimes.
Yeah.
However, I still feel the need to take some notes if there's any words used by the client I want to remember. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you shift from your earlier mindset of having to take notes to not having to take notes?
So Ruxana, this was a big struggle for me because I'm a very avid note taker. Even if I'm sitting in a webinar or attending a conference anywhere or in a meeting, I will keep on making notes because that anchors my mind. Otherwise, my mind has a tendency to wander around. Now, for the reason you just mentioned, I had to learn to let go. And it was a leap of faith that let me try this. And I found that after all, you're remembering just at that moment. You have a 1.5 hour session, 2 hour session maximum. At the end of it, as a coach, if you think through what were some of the significant points that happened in that session, you're bound to remember. I'm sure, Roxana, if you tried that, you will not miss it.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll certainly try. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a leap of faith that you need to take on yourself, on your own confidence, your own capability. And believe you me, if it's important, you'll remember it. If you're not remembering, it's not important.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll certainly try it.
Yeah, Dr. Yogesh here, if I can just butt in. Am I audible?
Yeah, Yogesh.
So, I just seem to somehow reciprocate the point that you're saying on leap of faith, because
So Mr. Kailash Satyarthi says it is so important.
Thank you, Chindagetu. So, I had this also an habit of taking notes. And consciously, in many of the sessions that I've attended, this was pointed out as a possibility of distracting, the clients.
Yeah.
What I found is, and that's why I wanted to just butt in here, that if it is important, you will remember, is what actually works, in that session.
Yeah.
And then I sort of started developing this sort of a process to summarize at the end. And that's wherein, with his permission, maybe just take a notes, because that was something which both of us are trying to zero down on some of the, agreement aspect of the coaching.
Yeah.
And well, that comes up as a point wherein at the most we can take notes. So I thought of just sharing this. One is reciprocating this fact that if it's important, you will remember. And maybe how do we take the notes just in case there's a big gap between sessions.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely very relevant sharing. Thank you, Yogesh.
Thank you.
But who summarizes? You summarize or the client summarizes?
The client summarizes, and that's wherein I take notes, so that I don't forget it maybe when there is a gap between the sessions.
Yeah. And that gap may be just matter of few minutes.
No. Sometimes the coaching sessions might be after a week or 10 days.
No.
So I'm talking about those intermittent back.
Right. So what I do, Yogesh, is immediately after the session is over, I get down to Evernote.
Yeah.
And Evernote is there even on my cell phone, on my computer. So it depends on which device is accessible. I immediately open the Evernote and I open the folder where the client's name is there. And I will jot down the half a dozen bullets, which were the highlights of the session, before I get down to anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've just noted that point also when you mentioned.
So then I don't need to take the notes in presence of the client.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And by the way, when the subsequent session happens, maybe after a couple of weeks or a month, you have Evernote available to you to refresh your memory. And when you are in presence of a client, you have full recollection of what has actually happened in the previous session.
Yeah, I agree.
So you are very much present. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, Yogesh, but thanks for sharing.
So, Chandrakirti, you had a question next. I know.
So may I or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Agrawal. It was a very nice session, and I resonated with whatever you said in the immediately beginning, and that's when the question arose. My mind also wanders quite a lot while I'm listening to somebody, and invariably some experience of mine similar to the experience what the other person is sharing, and then you start thinking about. So my issue is something like how being empathetic or understanding others' emotions or feelings and all that. Quite often, how do you say, comes in the way of managing my own emotions and being emotionally detached. Let's put it that way, for a want of a better word.
Yeah. So Chandraketu, as a coach, you cannot be emotionally detached, because in a way, client and a coach is connected. And quite often what is happening inside coach is a reflection of what is happening with the client. And therefore you have to listen to your own inner voice. And that is the resource you have. And you may be able to simply make a statement to the client that, look, when you say this, I'm finding it very difficult and it's not resonating with me. Or you may say that I sense a deep struggle in the way you are sharing this particular thought. So your trigger is your own emotions. So,
sorry, please continue.
So Chandraketu, I need to be connected to my emotions all the time and use my emotion as a resource. As a coach, I cannot be blind to my emotions. And I mentioned about even sharing my vulnerabilities, because let's say I may be confused at a point in the coaching session. I have to say that, look, I find myself very confused in the way you have stated your story or your dilemma. I'm at a loss. I really wonder how we can progress further. So I don't know whether I'm connecting with what you're saying at this point in time, or you had something else in mind.
No, sorry. My inner voice more often than not starts telling, okay, well, handle it this way, or do this, do that. Just allow me this one question, and I make this statement very often. Okay, I mean more often than I would like to, is that like you said, you start off with, I sense. My question to the client on those kind of times happens as to like, what is preventing you from doing a certain thing? What is preventing you? So this kind of curiosity in my mind as to why is he not able to do a particular kind of thing, and I know it is going against all the norms that I have learned, but my emotions take control over my actions at that point of time. So my intellect does not hold the reins of my mind very strongly, and my sensory organs go out and blurt what they wish to, if I may say so.
Yeah. So Chandraketu, you are acutely aware of what is happening inside you. So I must acknowledge that's a great situation to be in. And you're also asking client a question, what is preventing you? What's in the way? That's a legitimate coaching question. And I'm just wondering, what is worrying you about asking that question?
So it's kind of a thing of, okay, so what's worrying me is that when I ask what's preventing you from doing a particular kind of thing, that is a solution in my mind. And I'm wondering, why is he not doing it?
So that is the problem.
Correct.
Solution is a problem.
Correct.
Because if I differentiate that with the childlike curiosity and a school teacher, then that question as a child would be without a solution. As a child, I don't know the solution, but I genuinely want to know what is in the way, what is preventing you, and I don't have a clue. Only you, client, know what is preventing you. So, yeah, and I may have an answer, but that answer may be just one of the 10 other possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So you just hide the possibility and just ask. Okay.
Yeah, so if you are open to connect with any of those possibilities, which may be the reality for this particular client in this moment, then you're not being judgmental, then you're not being a school teacher.
Yeah. So that should keep me upbeat, I guess. Just don't tell the solution. Yeah. Okay.
And even if you have a solution, you got to self-talk that what I think is a solution is perhaps one of the many other possibilities.
Yeah.
And let's listen to the client. What is her situation, her reality?
Thanks for making me look at it that way.
Wonderful.
Thanks
for bringing up.
So Dr. Arvind, we have 3 more questions. We have Aditi, Mrinal, and Ruxana who have posed 3 questions. We only have 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, so I'm just putting it out there.
Oh, that's great. Good to know.
So Aditi can start off. I think she had put her question quite early on, and then we'll have Mrinal, and then we can have Ruxana.
So Aditi, where are you?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. I'm just a beginner in this journey. I mean, I'm just pursuing my ACC, and quite often in the recent past, I've had sessions where the client only wants to maybe just talk or vent or share. And so it's just listening, with full attention. Does not also amount to being fully present. Because there are times I feel maybe I should have asked this or I should have done that, So, and I sometimes I genuinely feel the client also says I felt better after talking. I just wanted to share. I just wanted to vent. So just listening and being there in that call, is that enough?
Aditi, you're doing wonderful by listening and allowing the client to share whatever she wants to share.
Okay.
And of course, if client has a particular point that she wants to bring up, then you have to ultimately equally bring that to her attention that, you've spoken a lot in the last 20 minutes. I'm just wondering what is it specifically you're really concerned about.
Okay.
So you're asking her to crystallize. You're not giving your crystallization because that would be not fair to her because you don't know exactly where client is coming from. She's just spoken 20 minutes, maybe half an hour.
Yeah.
Listen to her. Now the next question is, so what is it that is really bothering you? What is it that you want to work on? And if you're seeing 2-3 angles, then you present it to them. That I see 3 kinds of things in what you've shared with me. I see this, I see this, I see this. Which of these you want to really work on? Which of these really bother you more?
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Helping the client move forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Right, Aditi. Best wishes.
Thank you.
Mrinal, please go ahead.
Yes, Mrinal, wonderful to connect with you after a long, long time.
Yes, Arvind, such a pleasure. So I must say that it is such an engaging session. One comment before I ask the question is, in the journey that whatever the beautiful insights and learnings you have shared has made me curious about that magic of the MCC journey, because you shared so many things that before MCC, this is how you were, and after MCC, this is how you were. So I think that makes it so much of a curious thing about what power the MCC program has. The question is around vulnerability. And you did have mentioned some points about it. However, my question is that if I have to acknowledge that I might not be using vulnerability so consciously, which I think even the way I listen to you is that probably after MCC, you might have started doing it more than while you were before. What could be a few tips for coach like me and many others here, that if you have to start practicing vulnerability, that few of the things you could share as nudges for us so that we can open up with a vulnerability, because there could be some fear, or maybe it doesn't come up in a most natural way, the way probably you would be doing or MCC coaches would be doing. So some tips or nudges that you would probably share with us, how we could probably bring in that vulnerability to start practicing it.
So Mrinal, firstly, thanks for your kind words.
Pleasure.
Coming to the question that you posed, basically, accepting the vulnerability is the first step.
Mhm.
Because oftentimes when you deny the vulnerability and you feel that I must have all the answers, then you're fighting with yourself.
Mhm.
But if you say, yes, I'm human being and I have my own feelings and I'm vulnerable as much, but I'm that and more. And that more is what gives me the presence. And that's why I'm there in front of you. So it starts with self-acceptance of vulnerabilities. But if you don't accept and you find then sharing a vulnerability is going to shame you or dilute your image in eyes of client, then that's what holds you back today. So getting out of your fear and accepting that the client is also not a child and she equally knows that you would have some vulnerabilities. So if you're masking, then you're really, not respecting her maturity.
Got that. Beautiful. And you demonstrated how you don't look at the watch. So when Preksha said, and we have 3 questions at 5 minutes, and you said, oh, is it? I really like that.
I'm privileged to have Preksha to keep it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Arvind.
Wonderful.
Pleasure.
And best wishes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one last question from Roxana, if she's still on call. Please do.
Yeah. Yes. Do we have the time, Preksha? Can I take the time?
Yes, I did promise you. So you have Dr. Agrawal to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Dr. Agrawal, is it okay with you?
Yes, Roxana, absolutely fine.
Thank you so much. So my question is this, Doctor. So one of my close friends has asked me to coach her. Now, I'm very willing to coach her, but at the same time, she is my friend and I know her pretty well. So I'm very mindful that I might have to leave certain aspects of my friend behavior behind when I go into the coaching mode. So could you maybe throw some light on what I might need to change in my mindset?
Yeah. So Roxana, this is a situation which is a very important one for you to firstly must acknowledge that you're thinking about it upfront. And the first step would be at the contracting stage itself, if you share it with her that, there is a vulnerability here because 2 of us are great friends and, we have a past together. And now we're going to engage with each other as a coach, where I'm going to be playing a coach, not a friend. That said, there is always a possibility because besides coaching session, you're going to also have normal hangout as a friend. So how are you going to keep your friendship and coaching in 2 separate compartments? That's a big challenge for you.
Yes, exactly.
Unless you say that, look, while the coaching session is on, we will have only coaching session and no hangouts. But that may be difficult.
Yes.
So there will be a fault line, there will be some overlaps, and I'm just thinking aloud. If I were in your shoes, how will I handle it? I will find it difficult. I'm not saying don't do it. You may discover some ways to sustain it and distinctly from your friendship. But I, for one, would find it difficult.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you. And you've demonstrated yet another approach that you mentioned, sharing your vulnerability. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxana.
Right. So thank you so much, Dr. Agrawal, for being so patient and taking all the questions. And thank you to all the participants for asking such wonderful questions. It was such an interesting conversation. People from different experience levels of coaching coming up with questions from their vantage point, and Dr. Agrawal taking it all so elegantly. For me, who's a newbie coach, this was very, very priceless. And thank you so much personally as well. I just wanted to point out, I know a lot of people have already left the room, but this is a very eclectic group of people that have collected here. And I don't know if all of you all know each other or all of you all would be interested to stay in touch. So what we decided was to offer the opportunity to everybody present in the room to stay in touch. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. It's just a very simple thing that we have tried to kind of do is, sorry, I think I shared the wrong screen. So we've basically made a WhatsApp community. And if you feel like this is something that you would want to join, you can just take the scan of this QR code and join. It's a space that we wanted to create for coaches to interact with each other and to stay in touch with each other as well as us. So please feel free to join this community. It's going to be a calm community, so don't worry about that. And thank you so much, everybody, for making the time. So we hope to see you again in another webinar.
Wonderful. Best wishes. Absolutely delightful conversation. Thanks for your patience.
Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.